Coming up on the live and interactive ACSA Legislative Lunch Break, Michael and I will get you all of your latest news and information from the state capitol and CDE with an in-depth analysis on how it impacts you. Plus, we have reached the end of session and now bills are heading to the governor's desk. We'll tell you about the bills that are on their way, specifically the sponsored ones from ACSA and how they will impact your work.
Plus, we'll play a little game we like to call Where in the World is Edgar Zazweda? That next on the ACSA Legislative Lunch Break. And that starts right this second.
And it's just after 1 o'clock, 1:02 as a matter of fact. Welcome to the live and interactive ACSA Legislative Lunch Break, back after a few weeks off. I'm Naj Alikhan, ACSA's Senior Director of Marketing and Communications. This is Michael Kelly, our emerging media manager here in the Marketing and Communications Department. Michael, we have been gone, as I mentioned, for several weeks. We get to play an exciting game coming up, but certainly lots to talk about today.
Guten Tag, everybody. Good to be with you. Naj, 1 o'clock here on the West Coast, 10 o'clock if you're watching in Germany. Perhaps a little clue for you as to where our executive director is right now. But Naj, a lot has happened over the last couple of weeks, and there is a lot to get to with our governmental relations team.
Yeah, we're going to have Edgar. I'm sorry, Edgar. Let's try that again.
I know you're missing Edgar.
We're gonna
have him too.
I know. We'll have Ivan Carrillo and Cordell Hampton with us in just a couple of minutes. There's a lot happening inside the state capitol. A lot of these pieces of legislation that have moved over to the governor's desk could have an immediate impact on your work and what you have to do inside your school district to support students and support your school. So we'll talk about that in just a moment. I want to give you a couple of news headlines, a couple of good stories to talk about. We'll talk about this more with our governmental relations team in a couple of minutes, but a bill has moved to the governor's desk that would ban those ultra-processed foods from school meals. Now, you may remember last year, the state banned 6 synthetic food dyes from school meals. Ultra-processed foods, according to an article in The Guardian, make up 73% of American food supply. They are, quote, industrially formulated products that are often high in fat, starches, sugars, and additives. California has been a leader right now in supporting healthy school meals, and this year more states are following suit with respect to proposed legislation on food dyes and ultra-processed foods. And it's really actually a great piece of news to give to you. And I'm going to credit a lot of our viewers because we've talked about this here on the show. And it's nice to know that some of this actually has made its way into the school districts. The California Student Aid Commission, in an article published this week in Cal Matters, reports that the number of high school seniors applying for federal financial aid has grown by 11% so far this year. 340,000 students applied for the federal student aid, which accounts for nearly 3/4 of the state's high school seniors, according to this article. So certainly great news on that. Michael, we talked a little bit about how Edgar is not currently here on the show today, but maybe we could play a little bit of a game.
You know what? I love this game. You love this game. I think the viewers love this game. And so, yeah, without further ado, let's play Where in the World is Edgar Zazweda? I will be up front. I don't think Edgar is flying Southwest, but Naj, you and I are holding out for some partnership from Southwest, or at least some frequent flyer miles in some capacity. So Edgar, on a flight from Sacramento into Munich for Oktoberfest, which just happens to start in the month of September. Make that make sense. Naj and I talked before the show. We had a picture ready to go of our executive director in Lederhosen. And then I realized I like my job. I'd like to keep my job. And putting the executive director in tights and the whole outfit I didn't know if that would bode well for me, Nosh.
It was a bit much. It was a bit much.
Bit.
Yes.
That's not to say it couldn't appear next week when
No,
Edgar
that's
sends a photo of him in Lederhosen.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. And Jeff Oakes, one of our loyal viewers here, asked, "Do we get to put in our guesses for Edgar's location?" Asking from Princeton Unified in Region 2. Jeff, if you had Germany on your "Where is Edgar" bingo card, you are the winner. I'll bring you a gift at the ACSA Leadership Summit coming up in November. We'll talk about that in just a moment. But Edgar, it is, it's 10:06 p.m.
Again, I'm
there.
Michael.
No. I was going to say, Edgar, it's 10:06
right
in Germany. So if you are watching, and I know you probably are, go ahead and jump into the chat and say hello.
I hope he's not. I mean, the guy deserves a nice little break for a little while, especially at the end of legislative session. And, much deserved week off.
Hey, listen, I responded from Hawaii and from Mexico. It's the least he could do. I want to point out Nary Pies is first on our chat today. Scott Carroll, Sarah Bradshaw with us as well. So great to have you guys. Let's go ahead and switch topics right now. Legislative session is coming to an end. Now the bills have moved over to the governor's desk for either signing or veto. Lot to tell you about, especially because some of this legislation could impact your work literally on day one. So let's bring in our guests right now. Ivan Carrillo is ACSA Senior Director of Policy and Governmental Relations. Cordell Hampton, Legislative Advocate for ACSA. We're keeping a scoreboard on how many opportunities we have to make these two hardworking governmental relations staff members laugh today. I see one out of Ivan right there, so we'll count that as one.
I'd also like to point out, though, Nash, look at Cordell. He has a full painting behind him.
But he's got, see, look at that. He's got background this time. It's actually,
here we go.
I'm impressed.
Every time he comes on the show, just a little bit each time.
Yeah, just a little bit. Well, you know what? Edgar's not here, so Cordell will just say, Edgar's going to pay for it, whatever you need back there.
I was thinking about maybe doing a mural of you and Edgar, that one photo we had in the background as well.
Please don't. Please.
The room.
I already have some artists that are on retainer. So
yeah, Ivan is shaking his head at that entire concept. That's fine. Ivan, let's start with you before we dive into the bills. Give us a bit of a behind the scenes look, because it's been an eventful few weeks since session restarted. Tell me about what the final week of session looks like as things move over to the governor's desk.
Yeah, so last week was this past Saturday was the last day that the legislature had to be able to pass bills and send it to the governor's desk. So this is what we deem the last week of session, is everything that leads up to that final deadline. And it's bananas is one way I would describe it. It is throw everything that you learned in political science classes out the window in terms of just the legislative process and how bills are adopted and statute is made. It's negotiations that are happening on the fly, language that's going into print, and there being committee hearings when that language has been in print for less than 24 hours. Early mornings, late nights. It's pretty exhilarating, honestly, for us political junkies and us who work in this world. But there was a lot that was still in play, to say the least, in education, but certainly outside education as well. So it was pretty wild. But let me start at the top by giving a shout out to the team. The advocates just were doing anything and everything to make sure that the positions that our legislative policy committee had authorized were achieved, in terms of going up and down the halls, meeting with every single office of the legislature to communicate positions. Dorothy was front and center in a press conference last week. Constant direct communication with policymakers, sending texts back and forth, phone calls, but every single tool was utilized in that final week to make sure that we did everything we could to pass good bills and to stop bad bills.
Yvonne, just to follow up on that, more hectic than what you've seen in previous years?
Yeah, I would say It's funny. I think we often say this year's just unlike any other, and I think we have short-term memory because we seem to say that every single year.
Yeah.
But I would say there was significant policy that was left till the final days of the legislative session. So much so that they actually went beyond the initial deadline, which is supposed to be Friday, because there's this newer 72-hour print rule that forced them to go into Saturday. So they didn't even wrap up until Saturday afternoon. There's a whole host of new legislators that are in their first term as well. So I think that adds a completely new dynamic. Also, when you have such a considerable amount of them who are present and who are going through this process for the first time. But yeah, I don't know if it's because of my short-term memory or because it is significantly different, but it certainly was chaos there in the last week.
Given the political climate that we've seen over the last 8 months now, we knew that protecting immigrant students, protecting immigrant families was going to be at the forefront of this legislative session. Cordell, I go to you. Walk us through the immigration enforcement related bills and what they could mean for schools and school districts.
Yeah, happy to do that. I think just take us back for a second. At the beginning of the year, as many of us may recall, the current administration moved to revoke several immigration policies that were implemented during the Biden administration, including the sensitive locations. In response to that, not too long after the rescission of that policy, the legislature introduced several bills aimed at addressing immigration enforcement activities and their impact either on or near school campuses. The one that's been most a topic of discussion is AB 49 by Assemblymember Marisucci. The bill attempts to establish the California Safe Haven Schools Act, ensuring that schools remain safe and accessible by prohibiting staff from collecting immigration status information from families. It also requires LEAs to adopt and update policies that align with these procedures that are established at the AG's guidance for schools, and also kind of allows school staff to prohibit immigration enforcement officers to come on school campus without a valid subpoena or court order. Another immigration bill that reached the governor's desk is SB 89 by Senator Perez, which requires schools to include procedures as part of their comprehensive school safety plan to notify parents, guardians, teachers, and staff when immigration enforcement is confirmed to be present on a school campus. Unlike an earlier version of the bill, which requires specific information to be included in the notification, the final version that was ultimately moved forward is an approach where it allows districts to have a local conversation about what these notifications should look like with community input, which is already built into the school safety plan process. It is signed by the governor. The incorporation of the notification in the school district's school safety plan will have to be done by March 1st, 2026, which aligns with the date to either review or to update a district school safety plan. And it sunsets January 1st, 2031. So this isn't a permanent notification to school staff, parents. It's only temporary. Similarly, there's another bill that also kind of has a sunset provision as well, and that's AB 1348, which allows LEAs to receive state credit for ADA losses when immigration enforcement activity causes a material decrease in attendance, as well as offering independent study to those students and sending out a notification about independent study to those parents or guardians. For those who are concerned about what about PRA requests, will that include the parents' information? Will that include the students' information? This bill exempts this type of form that gets submitted to CDE from being PRA-able. And the last significant bill I want to hit on that's heading to the governor's desk is AB 495 by Assemblymember Celeste Rodriguez, which updates the caregiver's authorization affidavit form by clarifying relative base eligibility in the notice language for school enrollment and school-related medical consent forms. We've received a lot of questions about this bill and just what is the authorization form about. If you go to our resource hub or your immigration resource page, we created an additional document that kind of talks about what the caregiver affidavit form is, what it can and cannot do. So I highly recommend checking out our resource hub page to learn more about that form.
Cordell, let me just make sure for clarification purposes, because you talked about Senate Bill 89. That is the school safety communications plan if ICE should go on campus. and you talked about the March 1, 2026 deadline for that, and to allow for community input. Obviously, that March 1 deadline is impactful because the work has to start as soon as the governor signs this legislation.
Correct.
Is that an overall district plan that they are going to be required to put together, or is that an individual school campus within the specifications of SB 89?
It's both, as is specified in the school safety plan code section. The March 1 date aligns with the date that's already in statute. And so for these next couple of months, districts are going to be looking at how to incorporate, having these conversations that they already have to have with regard to earthquakes, fires, any other type of natural disaster or emergency. This is just one more thing that's a part of the school safety plan. I know we've talked about how the school safety plan has grown to be this enormous thing. But it is an avenue in which it creates that natural kind of community dialogue to have the discussion in terms of what that personalized approach looks like.
All right. So, folks, remember that March 1st deadline, because that one is coming up. And if you do have questions for Yvonne or Cordell, go ahead and put those into the chat. We'll try and tackle some of those a little bit later on. I saw Helio's question about legislation that may be vetoed. We'll talk to our team about that in just a second. Yvonne, let's talk about charter school oversight, because that was front and center here for our lawmakers. What were the key developments to that, and how might this shape the field moving forward?
This topic was certainly front and center all year long. There were some really egregious cases of fraud and misconduct that got a lot of headlines and coverage. And so in response, there were multiple pieces of legislation that were introduced. And we took these very seriously and had multiple conversations with our legislative policy committee, and ultimately got clear directives from our LPC for ACSA to advocate for two core principles as part of our charter school lobbying efforts. One is that for there to be coherence and clear responsibilities in terms of new requirements, in terms of related to oversight. But secondly, and importantly, that there be funding provided to support authorizers in meeting these new responsibilities. What was just communicated to us is that it's already difficult, particularly for small school districts who authorize charters, to meet their oversight responsibilities with the limited dedicated funds that are provided. Unfortunately, the way the legislation played out is that these two core principles weren't included in SB 414 in what the bill that ultimately has reached the governor's desk. And so there continues to be real concern, and concerns that we're certainly going to be uplifting to the governor's office, and making sure that that's part of the considerations to help inform his action.
Cordell, we know that not every proposal that is presented is going to make its way to the governor's desk. Mm-hmm. What are some of the things that you saw over the last couple of weeks, last couple of months, of these high impact bills that stalled out, and what does their future look like moving forward?
Yeah, I think like one of those bills, for example, would be like AB 1331 by LRRA. The bill had aimed to kind of regulate the use of surveillance technologies by employers. I think while the intent was for it to address more of the private sector, the bill would have had significant unintended consequences for schools. So, like, unlike private employers, schools don't track staff productivity through surveillance, and public educators already have protections for union activity under state law. The way the bill had defined some of the uses for tools such as cameras, ID badges, key fobs, email systems, they're all critical for protecting students and staff and public resources. Excluding these tools would have undermined schools' ability to prevent campus violence and respond to emergencies. So while there were some carve-outs, these carve-outs were written too narrowly. It excluded roles like school safety officers. So combined with kind of the vague penalty language that was also in the bill, and some of the removal of these tools that keep school students and staff safe, That bill had a very difficult time moving off the floor. Currently, it's still on the floor. It's on the inactive file as the legislative year has ended. But it's a bill that just continues to need more work, and is part of one of those, as I see, and it's part of one of those conversations about being chaotic at the last minute.
Yvonne, let me ask you about the bills that are at the governor's desk right now that have raised some concerns. What should our viewers be aware of, and where do we think some of those decisions may go?
Yeah, one of the bills that I would highlight is AB 715. So this bill was introduced by Assemblywoman Addis, Assemblyman Zabur, in response to really increasing numbers of anti-Semitism that has been playing out in schools. And I will just off top just say this is probably one of the most difficult bills that I think that we've been engaged in, or the legislature has grappled with. It's extended beyond this year. It dates back to last year, and it got highly political, to say the least. And this bill has a really legitimate, noble, cause that it's trying to address in terms of all kids feeling safe on school campus. But we had real issue in just early approaches to this. I mean, part of it was completely directed at ethnic studies initially, and so we successfully were part of the advocacy to move away from ethnic studies. We heard from our Leg Policy Committee as well that there are many other forms of discrimination and hate that are on the rise within our schools that are also in need of attention. And so we had successfully advocated for a broader approach that be taken, and that there be attention placed in addressing all forms of hate and discrimination, and making sure that all marginalized students feel safe and secure on school campus. But there continues to be really troubling language that is included in AB 715. Partly, this is related to really vague terms that are utilized. It talks about instruction must be factually accurate, and has no definition of that. And when you're talking about things that of this sort, it's just factually accurate, and what one deems to be factually accurate may be very different than what somebody else deems to be factually accurate. But in addition to that, it talks about how educators cannot push forth anything that's deemed to be an advocacy, that's partisan. Again, terms that are vague, terms that are undefined, terms that we feel, in working with our legal counsel, that is just going to open up liability. It will certainly have an impact on classroom and classroom instruction, and we've been heard loud and clearly from our teacher union partners that's certainly going to have a chilling effect on school classrooms. But we also worry about it opening up liability. So our hope is that we can continue these conversations in the next year and have an effort that's really focused on education, on training, on providing our schools the supports and tools that they need to help prevent anti-Semitism, and as well respond appropriately, and if these cases do arise as well. But that's one bill that got to the governor's desk that we see as being having some really problematic pieces included in it.
Something to watch in the days and weeks ahead for sure. If you have not subscribed to ACSA's YouTube channel, I'll just tell you, 8 subscribers away from 4,000. So if you haven't subscribed yet, please go do that. A couple more questions before we get you guys out of here. Cordell, we know that there were some ACSA co-sponsored bills. Where do things stand there?
So first, I'm happy to say that all of our sponsored legislation made it to the governor's desk, but the advocacy does continue for one bill. And in particular, that bill is AB 1224 by Assemblymember Valencia. ACSA, along with other co-sponsors like CASBO, CSBA, county superintendents, co-sponsored AB 1224 to restore 60-day sub-flexibility to provide for schools for critical tools for maintaining classroom continuity during teachers' leave and unexpected vacancies. We did receive a lot of opposition from CTC, public advocates, and CTA, which are centered on the belief that schools already have sufficient options, that only fully credentialed teachers should be allowed to serve in classrooms. However, our administrators know that firsthand that these options are often fall short, particularly when covering sudden leave for teachers unexpected to return, or in situations where subject matter experts are often hired under permits for hard to staff vacancies. Recognizing these challenges, the authors took some significant amendments to address the concerns, addressing transparency requirements, oversight mechanisms, data collection, and professional development supports for substitutes. The bill passed overwhelmingly with bipartisan support and now sits on the governor's desk. But on Monday, you guys may have seen in your inboxes, we activated our members to encourage a signature, including reaching out to our VPLAs who engaged with it during our legislative action days. Members are also encouraged to add their voice by contacting the governor's office directly or reaching out to Saret Kaminsky, who's been working very hard on this bill and other bills I'm going to talk about very soon, to fill out a letter template, which we could be more than happy to share with you. We also have AB 606 by Senator Cork Silva, which is another co-sponsored bill with the Association of School Counselors, the Association of School Psychologists, and the California County Superintendents, which allow out-of-state school counselors, psychologists, and social workers to begin working in California schools under supervision while completing any missed requirements with the Institution of Higher Education. We also have AB 959 by Senator Hadwick, which is co-sponsored with Placer County Office of Education and the California County Superintendents, which allows CTC-approved districts and county offices to offer their own administrative intern credential program. And then lastly, there's AB 962 by Senator Hoover, which empowers school districts to temporarily restrict smartphone use during emergencies or perceived threats. That's already kind of mentioned in your guys' school safety plans to make sure that students are more focused on the emergency at hand and not so much on their phones. So those are all sitting on the governor's desk waiting for approval, but we really need your guys' help in getting the last push for AB 1224.
Yeah, AB 1224, I think, is a really interesting one because, pardon me, we're talking about continuity in the classroom. We're talking about being able to keep the same substitute teachers in for a longer period of time because, Cordell, just correct me if I'm wrong, the regulation right now is 30 days in a classroom, 20 days in a special education classroom. 1224 seeks to extend that out, to support continuity in the classroom. Hard to imagine that people are necessarily against this proposed legislation. I will tell you that ACSA, along with CSBA, CASBO, and county superintendents have put together an op-ed that's going to be published statewide in support of AB 1224, but certainly need your advocacy about 1224. Yvonne, I just want to ask about this legislative process. Now that the legislature has wrapped up, what happens next? What should our school leaders, our communicators, our principals be ready for as soon as the governor signs off on some of these pieces of legislation?
Yeah, so immediately our attention turns to the governor's office, and again, working really hard to influence his decision on bills that are on his desk that we have positions on. And so that advocacy can look very different depending on what it is and the politics surrounding it. And so certainly there's work within coalitions to work in lockstep with those who have the same position as us. Some of it is trying to identify and are identifying who has the ear of the governor or of the people that surround him and make recommendations on particular issues. And so leveraging strategic relationships as well. As Cordell just mentioned, some of it is certainly leveraging our strongest asset, and that being our members and 18,000 school leaders to use your collective voices and helping inform the governor's office of why 1224 is so incredibly important and necessary for your students. So that's the focus. That's already started that work, and it will continue I expect that a number of bills that we've discussed here today probably won't be acted on for a few weeks. But in the meantime, we will communicate out updates when they come out and make sure that you all are aware of what happens, of how these play out, whether they were signed, whether they were vetoed, what the implementation date of certain provisions of each bill are, just so you can be sure to prepare accordingly.
Mm-hmm.
So that I would also say there's also preparation for next year as well. That happens immediately. One topic that we didn't have an opportunity to touch on thus far is related to childhood sexual assault claims. And so we've been really active and first and foremost trying to do everything we can to keep kids safe. And so we've been pushing hard for a statewide database for classified employees who are involved in, who are being investigated for egregious misconduct, so we can make sure that schools are informed and can be able to make informed decisions around hiring of classified employees. So that is included in SB 848 and on the governor's desk. But what notably isn't included in what went to the governor's desk is relief on the fiscal side of things. And we've been beating this drum loud and clear. And we've heard many cases from the field about the liabilities and the risk to fiscal solvency and the risk to precious funds that are utilized to serve your current students because of these cases that are out there. So I will say that there has been considerable movement and kudos to Dorothy on this front for leading the charge in terms of legislators understanding the issues. So kudos to the field as well for you all talking directly to your representatives. We've made significant movement. We have a commitment to try and bring about some meaningful reform, including what we're pushing for is caps on damages, to make sure that justice can be preserved for victims, but at the same time balancing that with ensuring that schools' operating budgets and their ability to meet the needs of their students is not compromised at the same time. So the work it starts immediately in terms of preparing for the next legislative session as well.
And this is why they are the best at what they do,
Mm-hmm.
always keeping students at the forefront. One last question, Yvonne, and perhaps as short of an answer as you can give me. Our dear ACSA member, Dr. Amy Slavinsky, asking, can you give an example of one piece of legislation that felt just chaotic? What's the most chaotic piece that you saw?
Yeah, I'll go back to the AB 715 that I mentioned here a moment ago. That bill went into print, I think, on Wednesday. Had a vote by the Senate Ed Committee that same day. Went to the Assembly side the next day. The Assembly Committee, but Education Committee didn't even get to vote on it, but they had an informational hearing, so it got a high level of scrutiny. But again, there wasn't an ability for there to be a vote on the bill. Then it got taken up ultimately on the Assembly floor, and there was considerable amount of conversation. But that one evolved incredibly quickly. There wasn't a whole lot of transparency in that last week, and this was really called out by policymakers legislators who were really upset about the process. But at the same time, there was a real issue that folks were trying to deal with. And so people were caught in between a rock and a hard place of wanting to do something, wanting to be responsive, but really upset about the process. There was a lot of recognition that this wasn't good policy and it had issues, but the compromise was, let's come back next year if this ends up getting signed. I recognize that you led with maybe as quickly as possible, and I was anything but quick in that. but
this is why we get to try again next time. You two gentlemen have worked so incredibly hard over the last couple of months. Please go take a nap. For the love of all things sacred, please go take a nap. Y'all have done incredible work. Cordell Hampton, legislative advocate. Yvonne Carrillo, Senior Director of Policy and Governmental Relations, and Warby Parker spokesperson, from my understanding, as well, here with us on the ACSA Legislative Lunch Break. Gentlemen, thanks for the time.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Hey, I want to point this out, Michael. Helio Brasil, who's one of our loyal viewers, superintendent over at Keys Union School District in Stanislaus County. When we talked about Assembly Bill 1224, the 60-day substitute piece of legislation, he said right there that will most definitely help small and rural districts. 60% of the school districts here in California are considered small and rural. Having that continuity in the classroom is certainly important to not just the districts, but I mean the students. So, speak up, folks.
This is why advocacy matters.
Exactly
right
right
here.
Exactly right. Folks, want to tell you about ACSA Leadership Summit. This is coming your way first week of November, November 6th through 8th. The theme this year, Lead Loudly, Sharing Stories, Building Bridges. Take a look. Again, ACSA Leadership Summit, November 6th through 8th in San Francisco. Lead Loudly, Sharing Stories, Building Bridges. Registered for that, ACSA.org/professional-learning. If you guys could have only seen the behind-the-scenes photo of Michael Kelly just dancing to the music that he picked for that promo.
See, I produced the thing.
Yeah. That's proof that you like what you're doing, folks. If you like what you've seen here on the ACSA Legislative Lunch Break, we invite you to subscribe to us on YouTube, follow us on Facebook. We are now 5 subscribers away from 4,000, which, by the way, is bigger, Michael, if I'm correct, than the largest school district in California and the second largest school district in the United States.
We're not bragging, though.
We're not bragging whatsoever.
We don't have the ACSA Legislative Lunch Break every Wednesday at 1 o'clock, though.
That's right. Folks, so go ahead and subscribe to us on YouTube, like us on Facebook. And when you do, and if your notifications are on, you'll get an instant alert when we are coming on the air with breaking news, and then our regularly scheduled Wednesday show, live and interactive. And next week, Michael, we'll be covering another important topic, learning loss programs in your school district, information that you can use immediately to combat some of the challenges with learning loss. So that comes your way next week here on the live and interactive ACSA Legislative Lunch Break. Folks, thank you so much for joining us here on the lunch break. Remember, we are live and interactive 1 p.m. on ACSA Facebook, ACSA YouTube, and ACSA LinkedIn. Have a great rest of the day and rest of the week, and we'll see you next Wednesday.